Hello, I'm Steve Kolska, the Guerrilla Journalist. Welcome to Iron Subculture. A few months ago, I put together a video asking who is the greatest of all time in the sport of powerlifting. I went to about a dozen of the top powerlifters in the world to get their answers. As suspected, there was one name that seemed to come up the most often, but quite a few people threw out other choices and shared some interesting information. While powerlifting is a game of big numbers, bodybuilders tend to be more about personal preference and artistic choice. The answers I received from the athletes I spoke to were even more diverse and interesting. Let's jump right into them.
Man, the greatest bodybuilder of all time in my eyes, you have to consider record. You have to consider what they did in the times when they did it and the lifespan of their career. And then you have to consider how well of an ambassador in the sport that they were. So, off top, I just put Lee Haney in that box. The biggest factor is he's retired so young, and he held the record for, he broke the record for the Olympia titles, the first one, eight times. And then he was always a stand-up guy, great reputation, able to interact with the bodybuilding community and the fans, and shed a good light on the sport by what he brought to the table. So he was the first, man, and everybody else after that was trying to chase him. And why everybody's trying to chase him, he had just walked away from the sport at the top, very gracefully. And it's nobody's really ever done that. And I don't think anybody can really duplicate it. So when it comes to just the sport itself, I think he embodies that.
Dorian Yates. I think Dorian Yates is just pure effort. Not so much a genetic gift as like where Ronnie and Phil Heath. I feel theirs is more genetic gift. I feel that Dorian's was from work and effort, and that's I probably relate to that because that's kind of how I look at myself. It was more not so much a genetic gift as it was, a relentless effort.
Let's see, the greatest bodybuilder of all time. Well, in my opinion, I would have to say, hands down, Ronnie Coleman. He was just, there's really, what words do you use to describe the man? Between his size, his shape, the detail, the rock hard graininess that he brought to stage. He was just insane. You just couldn't stop looking at him, and he was just, every time he stepped on stage, well, that's why he holds the record for the most Mr. Olympias. So absolutely, hands down, Ronnie Coleman, the best of all time, just an amazing bodybuilder.
The greatest of all time, who had the best physique, hands down to me, is Shawn Ray. Shawn Ray, classical poser, classic physique, just his lines, his streamlines. He wasn't the biggest guy, but when you looked at him, I always judge people by who do I want to look like. You got your big monsters out there, but they look like a garage. They look like a walking garage. It wasn't aesthetically pleasing, So I personally would say Shawn Ray. Kevin Levrone had an extremely nice body. Of course, Flex Wheeler. I never put Ronnie Coleman in the picture, even though Ronnie was a freak. He had his gut out to here. Everything was just too big. That's personal preference. He was one of the greatest, but who's done the most for bodybuilding by far is Arnold Schwarzenegger. You can't deny it. Arnold couldn't step on the national stage against any of these guys today. But in his day, he wasn't even the best in his day. He had the best mouthpiece. He was able to portray and bring bodybuilding into a new era, which nobody else ever has. So, yeah, he's done the most. But you can't take away his brilliance of the way he posed, the way he portrayed bodybuilding, because if it wasn't for Arnold, bodybuilding may not be where it is today. So hands down, who did the most for bodybuilding, it's not even close. Not even 10%. Because Arnold's still the number one, that he ain't been on stage in 40 years. He's still the number one on most bodybuilding magazines. They reshuffle his old ass pictures. Every month, it's another old ass picture of him.
I would say, honestly, probably Arnold. Just from the illusion he created on stage. That's what a lot of people don't understand is, Frank Zane's another one, but just the silhouette, creating an illusion to the eye that's looking at you, can make you seem so much bigger than you really are. And he was great at mind games, and just his work ethic and motivation and visualization. So I'd say by far Arnold. Plus he brought, I mean, if a lot of us wouldn't even be touching bodybuilding or weights if it wasn't for him in the movies or his bodybuilding career. So definitely Arnold.
The greatest of all times for me, it's a tough question because we have so many Olympia winners, multiple time winners. We have Darrem, we have Cormier, as well as you got Lee Haney. But when you're talking popularity and everything, it's Arnold, of course. So I guess I'll have to give that to Arnold in that respect. But Lee Haney always carried himself as a gentleman, won the most Olympias, and I really perceive him as the best Olympia winner of all time.
I believe that Flex Wheeler is the greatest bodybuilder of all time from a genetic and from a structural standpoint, but from a competitive standpoint, no. So I'm going to modify my answer a little bit. I would have to say that probably from a sheer bodybuilding aesthetic standpoint, from all of the raw materials that you need to be a champion, it would absolutely be Flex Wheeler if he's in the right shape. He has everything. He's hard to beat, but from a competitive standpoint, I have to say that Dexter Jackson is the greatest bodybuilder of all time. He's 52 years old, still competing. He's a consistent winner. He has unbelievable genetic gifts, as well as he still continues to compete over and over and over. And he's also one of the most winningest bodybuilders in bodybuilding history, so that absolutely qualifies him to be the greatest. And his body today looks better than it did 10 years ago and 20 years ago. And I remember seeing this guy coming up in the early 2000s, and he certainly is better than he was then today. So he seems to have, obviously I know he's probably modified his training and things like that nature, and even his dieting practices are different today than they once were, but he is absolutely one of the best of all time, and I consider him one of the greatest of all time because of his ability to slowly and consistently make improvements on his physique in spite of what anybody else might say about the aging bodybuilder. I think a lot of people, myself being 46 today, I know that you have to adapt your training and your diet and your nutrition and all of everything that goes into this sport to be a successful bodybuilder. And he's been able to do it. I think he probably has a little easier time than most adapting. Some of us have to adapt a little more, adapt our training and our diet more, but he certainly has been able to do that, make consistent changes, make consistent improvements on his physique over the years, and still consistently show up at shows better and better and better, and still place in a very, very high, if not winning pro shows, even today, still winning shows. So Dexter Jackson, for me, makes that case today. I have a couple other people on my list that it's hard, depending on the criteria you use or how you define greatest. But if I was to define it competitively, it would be Dexter Jackson today. If I was to define it by sheer raw talent, Flex Wheeler. If I was to define it by somebody I personally admire in terms of their physique and their competitive history, Ronnie Coleman, the King. Because just the sheer mass that he has and unbelievable conditioning that he would bring to the Olympia stage with so much muscle. Hard to see a guy that big come into a contest and in that kind of shape consistently, just be dialed like straight, hardly it's like the guy didn't even have fat on his body, so to speak. So I have a sort of a strange modified answer, but that would be my pseudo answer, if you will, my modified answer, if that makes sense.
It was a great battle between Dorian Yates and Lee Haney. Dorian took it to a whole nother level conditioning-wise. Lee Haney just had that great physicality. The way he posed, the way he presented himself, the structure. Winning Mr Olympia at 24 years old is like unheard of. And then to win it 8 consecutive times and to retiring at the age of 32, I mean, you can't think that that's not, nothing but remarkable. Anyone, when you finish your career at 32 years old and 8 Olympias, that's got to be the greatest of all time to me.
So there it is, bodybuilding's greatest of all time. Who do you think is the greatest bodybuilder of all time? Please leave your choice down in the comments section. Also, if you can share this video, and please subscribe. I have a number of other great bodybuilding, powerlifting, training, and nutrition videos that I'm going to post. Thanks a lot.